Welcome to Data in Chief, brought to you by Action. Join us as we explore compelling data stories, share analytic breakthroughs, and hear from leaders leveraging data to make a difference.
Hey, David, it's great to see you here on the Data in Chief podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Robert. It's great to be here.
Hey, I wanted to share a little bit of a story. My first introduction to you was actually not when we met in person at the Data Universe conference. It was a little bit before that, where I came across your stuff. I had posted something that someone had shared talking about how dashboards are dead because of text to SQL. And a very helpful commenter had pointed me to an article that you wrote about the challenges of text to SQL and how the difficulty in implementing something like that is not actually a technology problem. It's an organizational, cultural problem, talking about the human side of things and the challenges with accountability and things like that. And so something I really appreciated about your writing early on is that you really take into account the human side of the technology challenges. And that's what I'm hoping we can talk about a little bit today. So it was great meeting you at the Data Universe conference. What did you think about your time at that conference?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conference. I think it's like the start of something that's going to be like a big series because the organizers behind the conference run Big Data London. That's a conference that's run every year since the Hadoop days, and it's gone from strength to strength, and it's just huge. Really good conversations, good speakers. Yeah, I enjoyed the conference.
Now, you were there in the capacity as a sponsor working with Cube.
Yeah.
But when I walked up to the Cube booth and met you, you were actually wearing a Delphi t-shirt.
Yeah.
Because you had just recently announced a merger, right, with the company that you founded, Delphi, with Cube, and now you're the vice president of AI at Cube. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey there with founding Delphi and now your work at Cube?
Yeah, definitely. So about a year ago, maybe more than a year ago now, Michael and I, Michael Irvin, my co-founder at Delphi, we co-founded Delphi together. And Michael had built a prototype before this, which was using LLMs to interact with the DBT semantic layer. And I'd written a blog post about text to SQL using a tool called Ask Edith, and Michael had posted at the bottom of that post because he read my blog and mentioned what he was building, and then we ended up riffing on it and then having a few sessions hacking together on it because I had a use case for it at the time. And so we worked on that for a year. And that's kind of like very early on how we came across Cube, because we were looking for more semantic layers than just the DBT one. And I think the third one that we tried was Cube. Before long, we'd managed to integrate Delphi into Cube. It was by far the easiest one to use, actually, from a technical point of view, having more mature APIs than the other semantic layers out there. And we end up just working together more and more with Cube, being good partners, passing leads between us, the exact kind of partnership you'd want to have. So over time, Michael and I kind of realized that Delphi made more sense to be within a semantic layer or a BI tool. And yeah, so Cube, I think, as part of our partnership being so good, were interested in us joining. And so we ended up joining Cube in March this year, and very, very quickly afterwards, ending up at Data Universe, where I met you, and that's why I had a Delphi t-shirt on. It was too soon for me to have this Cube t-shirt.
Right, sure. So let's talk a little bit more about what this thing even is, because it might be something that a lot of people just aren't yet familiar with. We're dealing with new territory, or even some old territory when we're dealing with semantic layers. But for a lot of people, that's not something that they've even implemented or adopted in their BI toolkit yet. And when I hear the term Cube, I think way back to SQL Server analysis services and that sort of a cube. what we're talking about here is something a little bit different. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about why you think it's important for AI. One of the impressions that I got very quickly at the Data Universe conference, where everybody was talking about all the different ways that we're going to implement the AI for data and analytics and decision intelligence, which is different and better, I think, than business intelligence, which is what we're doing now. The vendors that were there, Cube being one of them, everybody who was trying to bake AI into their data was using a semantic layer. Can you just explain to people who might not even know what that is? What do we do with a semantic layer? What's the purpose of that?
Yeah. I think maybe one thing I'll explain quickly is like what the method is without the semantic layer. So when you ask AI data questions, and there are many tools which don't use a semantic layer, what happens is that LLM is given your database schema and is given some knowledge about how to write SQL, whether that's from its pre-training or whether that's from being given additional documentation. For example, let's say it was Snowflake specific, it would be given the Snowflake specific syntax inside that prompt. And then it generates a SQL query based on the schema that's provided, the question that was asked, and any additional information. Now, the problem with that method is that it has to kind of decide what the data means at the point where it tries to solve the question. So not only is it trying to pull the data and show it, it's also trying to define what the data means. So it's doing two things at once. And so that definition of what the data means is exactly what the semantic layer is for. The semantic layer allows you to codify what does your data mean, how it should be joined together, how do you aggregate specific columns or combinations of columns to generate understood metrics by your company. And that's exactly the point of the semantic layer. And a semantic layer like Cube does that deterministically. So an engineer would go in and write the Cube, YAML, JavaScript, Python syntax, define those metrics. And then that is compiled from a request into SQL because of the definition that has been built by the engineer. And that's deterministic. And so what that means is if you use an LLM to interact with a semantic layer, you're not expecting it to know how to join tables together. You're not expecting it to know how to define a metric or a dimension. It's just choosing those from the ones that are already predefined in the semantic layer.
You've already taught it what your data means.
Yeah.
You've trained the system specifically so that it doesn't get confused.
Exactly. It's kind of like there's an analogy, like a restaurant analogy. So with the semantic layer, you get a menu. Without the semantic layer, you get a bunch of ingredients. And you have to make your meal.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to me to see how semantic layer technology has kind of gotten going, or actually so far failed to really get going. I've seen a lot of people get really excited about DBT and some of the capabilities that they have in being able to define, all of their schemas in their database in a way that just makes business intelligence a lot easier. But companies seem to have been so far very slow to adopt that technology. I've not come across, some big funded effort to implement this semantic layer technology. And you had written something that I think really, really nails this about why that is. You had said, ask any senior data stakeholder what a semantic layer is and why they should invest in one. And they require a lot of education and persuasion of the benefits. But when it's simply the infrastructure needed for their AI data experience to work, to be safe and reliable, then it's like explaining why a train needs rails. Can you unpack that a little bit more and what you're seeing in terms of AI being the driving force to bringing in semantic layers?
Yeah, totally. So I think where the problem that has happened with the semantic layer in the past is if you've tried to sell it on its own, it's a bit of an abstract product. And this is one of the things Cube used to find over the last year before we joined them, was when we were in their booth with them, they could just point at us and say, "Oh, look, here's a benefit you get from deploying the semantic layer. You can get AI on top of it." And I think that's the thing. Business stakeholders need to know what am I going to get out of this investment. And with the semantic layer, it's almost like the benefit you get is infrastructure. It's not an actual tangible benefit. It's the promise of more other benefits that can be built on top of that infrastructure. And that sometimes is hard for people to get their head around, especially if they're not technical, especially if they don't have like an engineering mindset. That, in implementing this, yes, will require an upfront cost, but then will reduce the cost of future work afterwards and increase reliability and all of those things. They probably would go for low hanging fruit over doing a project like that, especially if it was a long
Yeah.
project. And I think that's why AI can really help with the proliferation of semantic layers, is because essentially I feel like we've proven that you need a semantic layer to have an AI answer data questions for business stakeholders in a self-serve way. So given that every senior stakeholder I've ever spoken to, if you ask them, do you want to be able to ask AI a data question and get an answer back in a few seconds rather than wait 2 weeks for an analyst, they all say yes. No one has ever said no to that question.
Right. The way that I wrap my mind around this whole thing is that you're right. A lot of people don't understand code. They don't necessarily understand the language of SQL and Python and JavaScript and so on. But we all understand language. Um, I may not know as a business stakeholder how to write a SQL query, but I know how to ask a question. And really what this is to me is just a way to translate that question into the data. It's just a translation tool at the end of the day. And it's a very specifically constructed translation tool where we have the translators, so to speak, which are the maybe data engineers sitting in the background, translating this field in this column means XYZ, so that when a business stakeholder just writes a normal language question, we know what to do with that.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the way I think about it is that large language models have been trained on language.
Right.
Some of that language is like Stack Overflow SQL, which is why they know how to write SQL. But most of it is not. Most of it is normal language, which is composed of nouns, adjectives, verbs. And what the semantic layer does is it abstracts the data structure into those things. So the entities in the semantic layer are like nouns, the dimensions in the semantic layer are like adjectives, and then even like quantitative terms, which are common in language, they're like the metrics and aggregates inside a semantic layer as well. So it allows the LLM to kind of stay in the realm of language, which means it's more likely to get things right.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that a semantic layer does is it offers this constrained interface. So Cube has things like REST APIs, GraphQL APIs, and because they're much more constrained than something like SQL, you're really just asking for a list of things you want, and that's just more or less with an envelope that's JSON, and that's really it. And it just means that reduces the room for error even more as well.
Yeah. So far we've talked about how things work, what this thing is with the semantic layer, why it's important, how it fits in with all of the excitement around AI. Let's talk a little bit now about something broader, about just big vision, big ideas kind of stuff. You're the VP of AI at Cube, which puts you, I think, in a very strong leadership position for guiding. Where do we go with this? And I see two different directions happening. I'm interested in the directions that you're trying to lead into. I see in the world of business intelligence, there's a group of companies which are promoting the ability to more easily create a dashboard. I type a question and out pops a dashboard. And so now instead of developing the charts and pointing and clicking, I just type. And I think that will result in just more and more and more dashboards all over the place.
Yeah.
Then I see this other group of people that's saying, no, let's actually, instead of using AI to write a new workbook, so to speak, to write new content, let's use AI as a research assistant to explore the content we already have and keep it organized and make it navigable, without necessarily generating more and more and more stuff. Just help me find the stuff that I'm looking for. What's your vision? Where do you want to see all of this exciting new stuff begin to go?
Yeah, and I think like if you think about the AI assistant that Cube released on the 24th of June, that feature allows for that exact point that you described. It's a mixed use tool where a business user, and this is one of the first business user focused features that we've had, can ask a question, and sometimes it could be about the metadata available and what do we have in the semantic layer. But sometimes it could be, well, now that I found out what's there, show me what that looks like by month or something, and it's actually a data question. And so like we're not generating dashboards, we're not looking to be a BI tool, but we are looking to allow people to explore their data more easily.
What does that look like in practical terms? Like, let's say that I'm a business user, I'm logging into a web browser. What happens when I have a question? How does that work?
Yeah, and I think it's not too dissimilar to how you interact with ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these tools, right? You could go into Cube Cloud, you could go into an application that someone has built using our API, and there's a chat box, and with that chat box you can ask a question, and you don't have to worry about the syntax, you don't have to worry about knowing what everything exactly how things are named, because the semantic layer has abstracted away, that sales means revenue in this company. And if someone says, show me sales by month, they do mean revenue by month. And by revenue, they mean net revenue, because no one really talks about gross revenue, right? And all of these norms are baked into the semantic layer. And so that people don't have to worry about them when they're having to use data. They can just kind of talk about the things that they know about in their business.
So for the skeptics out there who aren't real sure if this is going to give them answers that they can trust, you've already talked about semantic layers and how that already adds a layer of trust, because you've got some expert intervention in that layer to define terms and translate meaning. But even with that, what do you think it's going to take for business leaders to trust that this is going to give us good answers?
So I think what will help with that is, I think when you start to use it and the objects that are returned to the user, they're named objects, known objects, like gross revenue, net revenue, things that they know about, and things that they can click on and go and see, how is this defined, who owns it. And so there's accountability baked in, because the accountability is part of the semantic layer. And so that just makes a huge amount of difference. And so also when they ask for help, inevitably from an engineer or a data person in their organization, that data person can look at the answer that they were given, and at a glance, and I've done this hundreds of times with Delphi generated queries, at a glance I can see, oh, okay, it pulled this, this, and this. That's not right, or that is correct. And if it's not right, you can correct it and say, no, that use this or you can update the description in the semantic layer, and then it behaves better in the future. So I think that's a huge deal. And that was one of the things that when we founded Delphi, the reason we wanted to use the semantic layers, I just didn't see how anyone could trust the answers without it.
I can see that. The way that I relate that to my own experience using the tools out there for chat and search interfaces, the difference between ChatGPT and Perplexity is that Perplexity gives me references and links back to where it found the answer. Here's the source where I got this. So if you want to dig further, if you want to verify this information, here it is, go right to it. So it sounds like you're describing something like that where, there is accountability. And again, that's something that I so appreciate about your approach to developing technology, is that you understand that just very human aspect of things. It's one thing to just make magical tools. And we're certainly doing a lot of that. It's very exciting, but the magic toolbox is used by magicians, and which magicians do we trust? Which wizard are we gonna listen to? It's the ones that can say, here's where I got my numbers. I can't tell you how many times as a consultant I've been asked, where did that number come from?
Yeah, half my life as a data practitioner. Where did that number?
I think there are a lot of people listening to this video right now and really nodding their heads. Yeah. So David, what are you excited about? What's new and up and coming that you think people ought to know about or look forward to in the world of AI and data analytics?
Something we're really excited about is just the infrastructure getting better. I'm also excited, it's been a while since that GPT-4 technology was out. And I think we should be seeing like something big come out at some point before the end of this year. And I'm excited because I just don't know how much more capable that will be. The other thing that I'm quite excited about from an AI point of view, what it feels like there's like a standardization now around Iceberg as the open like data storage. As someone who's worked in data engineering for a long time, that was not the case when I was coming up, and it was SQL Server and all this. There was no uniform shareable data standard. Whereas now it feels like the world has decided that Iceberg is going to be it. And that just means you can bring any kind of compute to this data storage and you can use it. And we've been looking at inside Cube as well as like, what does that mean for us? Like, does that mean customers have more flexibility? Certainly. And what does that mean for us in deployments? And so I'm really excited about some of those kinds of things coming out that aren't necessarily to do with AI, but will help because of accessibility.
So we've talked about a few things that are still, I would describe as early stages of this new phase of technology. Thinking about what it will take to get to a level of product maturity, one thing that comes to mind is that, for a long time, I've come across people who just wanted to centralize all of their data and put it all in standardized format. You mentioned Iceberg as a new standard, and all these things. And it's a great idea that never actually happens. What actually happens is we still have spreadsheets stored in file sharing services like Box or Dropbox or Google Drive or what have you. Do you see a day coming where tools like semantic layers and AI data analysis can point not only to fairly well-managed database sources, but also your spread mark?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that it's necessarily going to be AI that solves it, but I feel like that's more maybe AI could solve like the time because of how numerous those sources are, how the format changes from CSV to CSV.
How scattered it is
how
too.
scattered it is. Like you could imagine using something, an AI application, for example, that profiled all of the different silos of data that you've got and said, this one is in this kind of format and this one is in that kind of format. And these are the exceptions to the rules. And then suddenly you've got like this parsed like format that you can then know how to extract data from all of those places. And then you could centralize it, or you could federate how you access it as well. So I think there is scope there, although it's just one of those horrible problems that has like a very long tail to solve.
It is, but I'm hopeful that AI will help us clean up some of the messy stuff.
Yeah.
Because those things can be a big mess to clean up and takes a lot of effort. And so anything that we can do to automate that, I think could be helpful.
Because I think like for that kind of data, which is essentially still tabular, just in a different format, it feels like we should be doing better. But I feel like there's this huge sea or ocean of data out there, which is in like filing cabinets on paper, microfiche, all these kinds of unstructured image data sources. But I feel like that's all accessible now, because you've got AI that can convert those images into text, and then another AI that can convert that text into a structured JSON or semi-structured format. And then you've got something usable that can be in Snowflake or whatever you want. Like, yeah.
Hope so. It's a lot to think about. Lots of great ideas out there. Lots of things to dream about and plan for and look forward to. I appreciate you so much sharing your thoughts. I'm really excited about the direction that things are going and the things that you're doing over there at Cube. Really appreciate your time today, David. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert. It's been great fun talking to you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.